And we've got a few seconds to go. And the clerk is here and she'll call me if I'm off. It's exactly 6. We'll call the meeting to order. And the first question is, do we have any pecuniary interest to declare tonight and the general nature thereof? Having seen that we have none, we'll record that in the minutes and move on. I just want to welcome everybody and thanks for coming out to this summer evening meeting. And I just want to go through a little bit of the procedure about this public meeting. It's to permit citizens, business, and Frontenac stakeholders to come to council to learn about and provide input into the business case study on communal services for the Frontenacs. The meeting is being held in combination of in-person and virtual electronic format. The procedure for the public meeting will be as follows. First of all, we'll hear from the Director of Planning, Joe Gallivan, and CAO Kelly Pender will have a piece after Joe's finished to present. The next thing is I will invite those who are attending in person to come to the mic if they've got any questions or comments. And the third thing is I'll then invite those attending virtually to speak. And Brianna will let you in. And at that point, we are not absolutely sure if the sound system's working properly. We might have to take a few minutes to fine tune that, but we'll move on. And the last thing we'll do is, should there be any other persons wishing to make comments on or ask questions about communal services, they will then be given an opportunity to address council. So with that in mind, I think we'll ask Joe to start the presentation.
Thank you, Warden, and good evening, members of council and members of the public who are online tonight with us. Thank you for attending this meeting. So Mr. Kelly Pender and I are going to do a brief presentation to council and to those of you who are listening in or watching us on this project that we've been working on for 4 years at the regional level and working with the townships as well, the Communal Services Project. So there's 4 parts to our presentation. The first part is why we in Frontenac are doing this and the background work that's been done over the last few years. The 3 projects that we have collectively been working on for the last couple of years that are focused on communal services are essentially ready to go. And they're reinforcing that communal services will allow for a mix of housing types for seniors housing, a slightly higher density, affordable housing choices, which are very challenging right now, and actually also the opportunity to create employment lands or business parks, which we can't do right now because of the traditional servicing. Then Mr. Pender is going to talk about the main reason for the discussion tonight, which is the Municipal Service Corporation, which we also call the regional utility, the creation of the utility that will oversee and potentially manage the water and sewer services for these communal developments in the future. So next, please. So let's talk about first why we are doing this, a little bit of background. So in our villages and hamlets, we have no municipal water or sewer with the exception of the village of Sydenham, which has a water supply system that was required to be installed by the Ministry of Environment. All our historical settlement areas, the building lots are very small, and it's very difficult to knit new development into the villages because you can't build on small lots anymore for health and safety reasons. You need about a 1.5 to 2 acre lot to put a well and a septic on a residential lot. Meanwhile, our villages and hamlets have a lot of our public infrastructure investment in terms of lighting, sidewalks, commercial assessment, a lot of the stores, commercial uses are in our villages. So they're an important part of who we are in Frontenac. Next, please. So while communal services are the preferred provincial planning type of servicing, and they have environmental benefits, which I'll talk about, there has been a challenge to implement them, to put them in the ground, because it requires entering into what's called a municipal responsibility agreement, which is provincial requirement under the Environmental Protection Act. And Kelly and I can get into more detail, but in rural areas, it essentially doubles the cost of installing these systems. Almost every rural municipality in Eastern Ontario does not have the fiscal capacity to take that risk on of installing a private communal system and then not requiring the developer to essentially put the full cost of that infrastructure investment into funds for the municipality to have in case there is a failure. And that's the primary reason that even though it is a priority for the province and there's lots of benefits for communal, that has been the major reason why there's very few of these communal systems in rural Ontario. Next, please. So the official plan, the county official plan states very clearly that the lack of municipal services in our villages challenges our future community viability, especially if you look 25 or 50 years ahead. The next slide is just a little graphic of what communal services are. For those of you who aren't really clear what they are, they're instead of individual septic and wells or full municipal water and sewer, they're smaller scale that you can connect 5, 10, or 15 houses into a water and sewer system. And they're actually very, very good for rural communities because in terms of the demand, you know, in Ottawa or even Kingston, you can build out a 200 unit subdivision in a matter of 2 or 3 years. We probably don't get that amount of growth, but these are designed such that they're almost like Lego blocks that you can continually add on to the water and sewer system to expand them over time as part of the build out of a subdivision. So the advantages, much better environmental protection and public health than private on-site services. They're required under the legislation to be inspected and maintained on an annual basis. As I've pointed out, regular maintenance. They have fewer malfunctions and a longer life because they're always maintained. Next, please. In terms of community planning, if we were able to have communal services for new development around or in our villages, first of all, you would be able to build on smaller lots, and I'll show you the example of Marysville in a few minutes. So there's a better fit into the existing villages or hamlets. More people in these small communities can strengthen the local economy, the commercial uses on the main street, keep the schools open, and you also have a chance to build more walkable communities, which promotes active transportation. Next, please. So the latest provincial policy statement was issued in May 2020. And at that time, there was some changes made to the servicing hierarchy, which is the wording used to say what the province prefers for new development, how they should be serviced. Next, please. So there's three tiers of choices. The province prefers first and foremost that new development, irregardless of the type of use, be built with full municipal services, but that is clearly not feasible for our small municipalities anywhere in Eastern Ontario to put full municipal services in the ground. Now, there are communities in Eastern Ontario that have full services. Havelock's an example, but those were put in the 70s when the Ministry of the Environment was paying 100% of the cost of installation, which is never going to happen again. Private services at the bottom is the least preferred. That's our standard rural development. That's all we do in Frontenac County and many other parts of Eastern Ontario. Communal services are the middle ground, and they do give us potential for different choices for development in terms of housing, density, et cetera. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that's been done over the last couple of years. The first piece of work was completed in 2019. And for those of you online, if you're interested in more detail on some of these projects, if you do an internet search of Engage Frontenac and you type in communal services, you can come to a page that has all these documents that you can view in detail online for if you're interested in that, including the 2018 study. So essentially what that study did which proved to us was that the perceived obstacles in terms of engineering and planning and financial are just that, they're perceived. But they can be overcome if we work on this project on a regional county-wide level. The financial model really is the make or break. And the second study we did, which Kelly will talk about, helped us solve that problem. As part of this work, we asked the consulting team, which was comprised of engineers and planners, to prove to us what a difference communal services could make. So we gave them a real life example, and it's just down the road here in the village of Inverary in South Frontenac. Next, please. So I've highlighted this area, which is currently under construction. It's called the Willowbrook subdivision. And like the other subdivisions we've approved over the last 10 years in Frontenac County, each lot is on individual well and septic. So what we said to them is, can you do some engineering on this property and show us what potentially could go there? And it doesn't have to go, but what potentially could go there if we use communal services? What kind of density changes could we end up with? Next, please. So this is the brochure that they prepared, and I know it's hard to read, but again, if you go to the Engage Frontenac site there, you can download this brochure. On the left is the actual subdivision that was approved, and that is a total of 16 single detached dwellings, just a little more over 2 units per acre. It's a 70-acre site, all single detached homes with some open space because of some of the wetlands, etc. On the right is what the engineers and planners showed us potentially could happen on that site using communal services. Instead of 16 single detached on individual well and septic, we'd end up with a total of 62 residential units. So in this case, they show 41 single detached lots, 9 townhouse lots, as well as a 16 unit apartment building in the lower corner. In blue at the Perth Road, there is a small commercial use as well. And you can also see the septic field in the top corner, which can also be used as a passive park, not only as a septic system, but as a passive park. So you can see that there can definitely be a mix of housing uses, which we can't do right now on individual and septic and well. Again, this is just an example, but it clearly shows the potential of what can happen. So next, I want to talk about 3 projects happening in Frontenac that I consider are ready to go. They're at a stage now. We're either coming to the township councils or we're at the stages where they're being finalized, and we're gone from the theoretical to the practical. These are 3 projects I'm going to show you are ones that they've done enough work that we know that communal services can make a difference. The first one is in Central Frontenac Township. It's in the village of Charbot Lake. And we're just finishing completing a feasibility study on communal services. It'll be presented to Township Council in August, to be delivered to you in August. Next, please. So again, I encourage people to go to Engage Frontenac, and all of the information, including the virtual public meeting we held in February, is there. The study, when it's approved by council in August, will be posted online as well. So this is an aerial view of the village of Charbot Lake, and I've highlighted in yellow the school site. So you can see it's right in the heart of the village. The school has been demolished by the township. Its land's been cleared. I believe it's just over 1.5 acres in size. And originally, council was looking at putting seniors housing on the property and using the existing well and septic from the school. And that would have resulted in 2 4-unit apartments, total of 8 units. Council decided to pause and look at what would happen if we developed a site with communal services. So the township would have an opportunity to have mixed housing yet. And I'll preface this by saying that after this goes to council, there'll be more public sessions and for the community to decide exactly what they want in the site. But there's potential for 2 3-story apartment buildings up to 50 units. The surface water would come from Charbot Lake for drinking and septage. And to give you a sense of the boxes that these water and sewer would be in, they would be in buildings no bigger than a garage in your backyard. They don't take up a lot of space depending on the scale. So for 50 units, they would be almost innocuous on the site. Council also was interested in potentially hooking up other nearby uses. So the Oso Hall, the community hall, which is heavily used, is right beside this property, and it could be hooked into it as well to provide safe drinking water. So this comes from the study, and it was presented to the public in February. It's just a visual image of the 2 apartment buildings that could go on the site. And again, you potentially have 50 people living, 50 units in the village where people could walk to the main street, to the beach, etc. The second study is on Frontenac Islands, and it's the village of Marysville. We've just finished completing all the work on the secondary plan. And this comes from the announcement from MTO in 2018, where they announced that a new ferry was going to be provided to Wolf Island, an 86-car electric ferry, so more capacity. And potentially MTO during the peak season, they have not announced this, but there's a potential for them to run 2 ferries in the summertime to handle the summer demand. So next, please. Not only that, there's a new dock under construction in the village. It's expected to be completed by December. And this is the real game changer. Not only will there be more capacity coming to the ferry, but the ferry will now permanently dock in the village. And that's not the case now. In the wintertime, it docks in the rural part of the island on Dawson Point. Now, you would have an opportunity to live in the village of Marysville, work in downtown Kingston, and walk on the ferry and walk off the ferry. So that could potentially change things. So council was proactive, and they started a secondary plan process in 2019 to get ahead of trying to determine what the vision for the village should be for the next 25 years. Next, please. So this is just an aerial view of the village. You can see it's fairly tightly knit along the waterfront with the community grounds at the back. Next. And this is a map from the secondary plan showing proposed expansion area, which would be about 90 acres in size. Next, please. So the county does regional population projections, and the last one we had the consultant look specifically at Wolf Island with a new ferry coming. What kind of an impact would that have? And they've determined with the ease of access to the island that will result that we're looking at a potentially 350 people by the year 2046, and an additional 157 units, that most of those units would probably end up in Marysville. And that's partly directed by the provincial policy statement, which says you have to direct growth to settlement areas. And Wolf Island has a lot of prime agricultural land, so you can't sever those lots. So in the plan, which is now in front of council, it says all new development within the expansion area shall be serviced by either a public municipal system or by communal, and that developers are directed to the County of Frontenac's Communal Services Study for more information. Next, please. So council held the last public meeting last Tuesday. There was 3 open houses and 2 public meetings over the last 3 years. And it'll be in front of Township Council in September for their consideration of adoption. And should that happen, then it will head to County Council for approval in October. There's other planning approvals that staff have to work on in terms of zoning and site plan, but we expect that to be in place early next year. And if we get the utility up and running, then that will certainly make it much more easier for developers to work on expanding the village. The third project I want to bring to your attention is in South Frontenac, and it's the Village of Verona Housing Master Plan, which started last November. Next, please. So there was information sessions held in November, and next. There is a high-level concept plan that's been created to look at the potential of developing mixed housing, trying to accommodate more seniors in the community, connecting to the trail systems, and better access to the water. Next. So from the study, it says the purpose is to develop a master plan with a particular focus on the provisions of seniors and affordable housing. And at this stage, there's a potential for 2 apartment buildings, total of 110, 115 units, as well as townhouses. And as the study notes, in order to realize this potential, communal services will be required. Next, please. And then communal services will be provided to support the development, which would allow greater density than would otherwise be permitted if individual private services were proposed. And here's the timeline for that work. It's not that far behind Sherbrooke Lake and Marysville, but again, this is the third project where there's been some thought put into providing different housing choices in the community and using communal services to do that. So in summary, and this comes out of the first study we did in 2018, it works for the communal services work for the county. They increase our development potential, increasing the tax base, better environmental protection, more housing choices, which we don't have the opportunity to do right now, and a new approach to managing risk with the utility. It works for developers. They'll have the flexibility to address different market segments. And I think we all know that the demand north of the 401 is already here. It's just being able to deal with it. And then it works for the residents because they'll be confident that they have safe water, drinking water and wastewater treatment systems, and have a variety of housing options. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Pender, and he's going to talk in more detail about the regional utility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. That was very clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate the introduction and to communal services, and that should give us a good understanding of on the ground why the province is looking towards communal services as an option. So now we're going to turn our attention to what is essentially the purpose of tonight's meeting, which is the creation of a municipal service corporation. Municipal service corporations came into being with the review of the Municipal Act in the early 2000s, late 1990s. And it's a number of municipalities are using municipal service corporations, which are separate entities from the municipality, where the municipality are the shareholders. So the Municipal Act enables them. There's a regulation under the Act that sets out the guidelines. One of the requirements under the guidelines is to create a business case study, which is available on the website that Joe mentioned. And the second is public consultation, and the County Council has determined that they would like to have a public meeting. So we are at the public meeting stage for the Municipal Service Corporation. So the WSP second study, the first one was dedicated to what does communal services look like on the ground? How's it being implemented? What kinds of things are working and not working? And as Joe said, the primary impediment to the development of communal services has been that when they're privately owned, that you have to enter into municipal responsibility agreements. So if your system installation is $100, it's going to cost $200 to implement. So the consultants in the second study began to look at what does the governance model look like under a municipal service corporation. They provided the committee, which was made up of 4 mayors and 3 members of the public they gave them 6 options to look at. The committee selected the model that you're going to be seeing tonight. And it's being presented in draft form. So there are still opportunities to amend the plan going forward. But straight out of the study, the Municipal Service Corporation model presents benefits that are better aligned with growth and long-term objectives than the other associated models that we looked at. The other structural benefits, limited political influence. It is a separate corporation. Although the municipalities own the corporation, it is no different than a standalone corporation that's offering other goods and services in the marketplace. They have no authority to influence the municipality. The municipality can influence them. If they go bankrupt, then the corporation goes bankrupt, and those assets are dispersed under bankruptcy laws. They can be business oriented, so they will be looking at what is the best business model for operating. And we talk in the business case study about it's quite likely in the beginning that we're going to be looking to other utility corporations such as Kingston Utilities Kingston, or Perth Public Utilities, or the Ontario Clean Water Agency to do the operations. The Township of South Frontenac currently contracts with Utilities Kingston to operate their water facility. So we don't see this being a corporation with lots of staff operating things. This will be a business-oriented board that looks at the best way to implement processes on the ground. It does allow for profit, and in the business case study, we talk about a community benefit, and the consultant looked at a number of different existing municipal service corporations that do declare a dividend in corporate speak, or a community benefit from a municipality standpoint. And what the business plan says is that won't be allowed for 7 years, and it won't be allowed until an auditor signs off that it's required, and all of the municipalities vote to make it so. So that would be a long ways off, but it is one of the benefits. And it does allow for separate finances. So the finances of this corporation will be separate from the corporate members of the corporation. They don't get mingled like a library board finances roll up onto municipalities. These do not get rolled up onto the municipalities. And it does allow for a consistent approach. So when developers come to Frontenac, they'll understand that this is an option in all of the participating municipalities, and the rules will be the same. No different than if a developer comes to the city of Kingston, they know that Utilities Kingston sets the rules and the guidelines for utilities within the city of Kingston. So the management could be in-house, it could be third party, it could be municipally contracted. Those things are left open to the board as they get established. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the WSP study went through a number of different steps, and essentially we are at step 5, which is we're considering the draft council adopting the business case. So we're at step 4 in the process, and the recommendation coming from tonight will go to county council next week and off to the townships for their consideration. So we still have a lot to do. We have to draft and approve and pass the agreements and documents. Councillor Higgins, or Deputy Warden Higgins, you're Deputy Warden Higgins this week. We're part of the Eastern Ontario Leadership Council that went through a municipal service corporation incorporation. And there's the drafting of bylaw number 1, there's the election of officers. So there's a lot of procedural things to have happen, which would probably take us well into 2023 after the next election. Develop and adopt an asset transfer policy, which is identified in the business case, and appoint the boards and the officers to the service corporation. So that takes us into 2023. So why municipal service corporation? What are the advantages? So the primary advantage is that whole issue with the municipal responsibility agreement. The province lays out 3 levels of servicing for the province. The first is full municipal services. So water, sewer, big plants, big pipes. The second is communal services. And the third is private individual services. So this is pretty much a blend between full municipal services. Nobody's talking about building a $30 million sewage treatment plant or a $15 million water treatment plant. These solutions are small and modular. As Joe likes to say, they're just Lego blocks that you plug along and can plug in. So a municipal service corporation, the analogy that the consultants used is it's like vehicle insurance. If you self-insure one car, you need $5 million in the bank in the event of a catastrophic event. If you insure 1 million cars, you don't need 5 million. We're all going to pay our fair share. So the same theory holds for communal services. Municipalities currently hold 100% of the assurance for each individual system. And that's why so few of them have been built. And if you think about this from the developer perspective, if you're going to invest $500,000 or $750,000 in a communal service, and you have to pay that same amount to the municipality in case that service fails, that just adds to the cost of development, makes the homes less affordable, and increases the cost to the homeowner. So this is essentially a way to pool risk. And the technology has come a long way. And like a lot of things in Canada and North America, European communities are ahead of us. But having said that, there are a number of very good examples in Canada and in the US where this is happening and where communal services are in place. So some general conditions as stated in the business case study and extrapolated, there is no obligation on any municipality to participate in the municipal service corporation. Give any one of the 4 member municipalities of the county could say no. County council could say no, and all 4 proceed. The Municipal Act just sets it up such that it has to be within the boundaries of the municipality. So this municipal service corporation couldn't operate assets in Rideau Lakes or couldn't operate assets in Stone Mills, but is empowered to operate assets within the county or the participating municipalities. Municipal service corporations do not have any ability to levy a municipality. There is no mechanism within the Municipal Act for a municipal service corporation to say to Frontenac Islands, we need $200,000, give it over to us. That's not how it works. The business case study and the studies from WSP lay out the initial funding formula. After that, the municipal service corporation has to stand on its own. This is far different than a conservation authority or a public library board or a police board, that once a police board passes their budget, the municipality has to pay. Once a library board passes their budget, the municipality has to pay. That's not how this works at all. Participating municipalities will retain full control over planning matters. So if it makes sense for including the ability to enable private communal services through a municipal responsibility agreement. So if a developer comes forward in South Frontenac, let's say, that wants to go through the municipal responsibility agreement, and South Frontenac is in agreement with that, and they put up the money for a municipal responsibility agreement, they can do so. There is no ability for the municipal service corporation to force a municipality to do anything from a Planning Act standpoint. Each individual municipality retains full planning control, and the corporation sits there waiting for business from the townships to come their way. So each individual council can make planning decisions, whether that's individual lots or they don't want to see small urban lots, they want to see larger lots. That is an individual municipal planning decision that will be reflective of, first, the provincial policy statements, then the Planning Act, second, your official plan, and third, your zoning bylaws. So each municipality retains full control. And finally, the Municipal Service Corporation is a separate corporate entity. They're capable of borrowing, applying for grants, and contracting of services. So that's really important too. So it gives the Municipal Service Corporation the ability to go out and source grants. So for example, an FCM grant to do a development or a study. Central Frontenac was successful in receiving a grant from FCM to look at the school site to offset some of their costs. So that's available to you as a municipal service corporation. And in some instances, it may give you the opportunity to apply both locally and at the service corporation and combine assets to make a stronger grant, because we all know the federal and provincial government like partnership type of grants. So that's a possibility as well. Next slide. So what are the next steps? Assuming the public input tonight and we work through the process, finalize the municipal service corporation business case study, and pass that at all of the municipalities that want to participate, assuming it's 5, and then finally apply for incorporation, which would take 3 to 4 months. So that's the step that we're at next. Brianna? So with that, the only thing that I'd like to emphasize at the end of this is that there are a number of different models out there and a number of different ways to accomplish things. But at the end of the day, we know development is coming. Development pressures in Frontenac and the planning departments at South Frontenac and each of the townships, the pressure has been immense over the last few years. We also know that the good lots are largely gone. The planning applications we're receiving now in the planning departments throughout the county are on either marginal lands or on lands that have a number of different hazard areas that need to be adopted. We also know that affordability is an issue, and under individual services on 2-acre lots, affordable housing is virtually impossible. We also know that the provincial policy statements are pushing us towards either full municipal services, which we all know we probably can't afford, or communal services. And that's the middle ground that we're looking at, is that this municipal service corporation would operate communal services on behalf of all of the participating municipalities. And finally, this was the recommendation of the Municipal Housing Task Force that recently reported just before the provincial election. I believe it was recommendation number 44. that municipalities on a regional basis establish municipal service corporations to deal with servicing. They also see this, the province sees this as a way to decrease the requirement for development charges for these kinds of infrastructure requirements. But it is the province recognizing that these kinds of efforts are best done regionally, just like Utilities Kingston or Viridian and Belleville or Ottawa Utilities, that this is very technical work that is best done most efficiently and most effectively on a regional basis. So with that, back to you, Mr. Warden, and Joe and I are available if there are any questions, or if you'd like to go through the questions from the committee or the participants in the meeting.
Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thank you.
And the process was stated that we'll open it up to people attending in person for any questions or comments. And the process there is to address your question through the chair, and then we'll call on Joe and Kelly to answer anything that's technical in nature. Any questions from the floor? It's not your turn yet, Alan. Not your turn. That floor. Yeah. And I don't see any. So now the next part of the process, we ask those who have Zoomed in, the Zoomers. And Brianna is going to help us with that.
We have someone here, so I'll let them in to talk now, Warden.
We've got a hand up. You will allow that person in, and please identify yourself. And we don't see them yet. Oh, I guess we wanted to check the sound, right? Steve's standing by in case we need to turn it up.
We have Brenda Martin here. You're free to talk, Brenda.
Brenda,
Thank you,
you have the
Mr.
floor.
Chair.
Yes. Could you just say a couple of words so we check the sound?
Brenda Martin, my question is specific to Charlotte Lake site.
Okay, we can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead with your question, Brenda.
How did they plan to access lake water for the Charlotte Lake site, since the complex will be in the middle of the village?
Joe Gallivan's coming to the mic to answer that. I think he's probably been thinking of that.
Thank you, Warden. Thank you for the question, Ms. Martin. Now, I'm a planner, I'm not an engineer, but in the study, there was an engineering component, and essentially there will be a pipe, and I'm using plain language here, a pipe that will collect the water from the lake and pump it up to the site. The pipe will be underground. It doesn't have to be very deep. It's not like traditional water and sewer for full municipal services. And that water, drawing that water will require environmental approvals from the Ministry of the Environment and from the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority to ensure that there's no negative impacts on Charlotte Lake and to ensure that the water quality will meet public drinking standards. So I hope I've answered your question.
A follow-up to that.
I had it on, that's Brenda. Brenda, can you hear me? We can't hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
You had a second
I'm
question?
on
Go ahead.
mute. Can you hear me now? I'm on.
We lost you again, Brenda.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, so the lands surrounding the lake, are they going to be purchased, agreements put into place with property owners?
Yes, there'll be a lot more study go before it's built, but Joe, maybe you want to answer that.
Thank you, Warden, and thanks for the question, Brenda. So the intention is that the water would be drawn from the lake and the pipe would be installed on a public road, a public right of way. So for example, I'll just give you an example, Matthew Street in Sharpet Lake. Potentially the pipe could come out of Sharpet Lake or near the beach and then come up Matthew Street and then up towards the site. But that requires a lot more engineering design. So I'm just giving you that as an example.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. And the purpose of this meeting is not to get into the detail of the development itself. It's more conceptual to set up the municipal service corporation and that kind of thing. Any more questions online there, Brianna?
We have Cindy Deachman. I'm just going to make her live here now.
Welcome, Cindy. Can you hear us?
I can, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're live. We hear you 5 by 5.
Great.
You've got a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess in just looking through the asset transfer policy, I had some questions in terms of how the share structures will affect the overall project, just in terms of, I know there's the initial setup in terms of keeping the different townships with the voting priorities and based on the financial contribution going in. What I'd like to know though, what I don't understand is when assets are transferred in, other systems are transferred in, that financial component and shares are issued in lieu of, like, to pay for those systems. Does that dilute the share ownership, or is there going to be different classes of shares to deal with the voting setup? Because I'm just concerned that what's initially set up will change over time depending on the different systems that are transferred in and the value of those systems, if that makes any sense.
Good question, and Kelly Pender is going to answer that.
Thank you, Cindy. And my internet just went down, so I lost my business case study here. The asset transfer policy. So when assets get transferred in, and at this point, the only potential asset would be South Frontenac and the Sydenham water system. So it would have to be a decision of South Frontenac Council. The Municipal Service Corporation has no ability to enforce that. But I believe what the business case states is that it would be the membership that would decide how that could happen. So all of the other participating municipalities would have to vote in favor of it, as well as whether it was going to be a cash deal or a cash and shares. There is no anticipation of there being preferred and or common shares. It would be one class of shares to start. That's not to say that that wouldn't change later on, but that's the current anticipation.
Does that answer your question?
It does partially. I think, Kelly, what you're saying, so the asset transfer policy really is only applicable for the beginning of the corporation in terms of what might be transferred in. I guess what I'm wondering is, in say 10 years down the road, when a developer comes to a township and says, okay, here's my system, I want it transferred to the municipality wants it transferred to the corporation, the value of that, is that subject to the asset transfer policy? And does that change the share ownership if shares are issued for payment of that system?
If it's coming from a private developer, I don't believe it would. If it was coming from a municipality, then it may, if that's how the shareholders vote to decide on it. If it's coming from a private developer, I suspect it would be a purchase and sale. So for example, Lakeland Power in Parry Sound, Muskoka purchases a water power water generating station. it is a cash deal. It's not a share deal because there's a municipal service corporation cannot have private shareholders. It can only have municipalities as shareholders. So it couldn't possibly be a share transfer.
And is it anticipated then that the private developers who create the systems, they would, generally speaking, it would be them transferring directly to the corporation, not to the municipality and then to the corporation?
Correct. And that'd be set up through the subdivision agreement. So it would be similar to a road built under a subdivision agreement. It would be subject to a number of conditions. So for example, a road may sit there for 3 to 5 years before it's brought up to municipal standards and transferred to the municipality. The same thing with this, and I believe it's the first study that talks about a number of the safeguards that would be in place before an asset would be transferred to the municipal service corporation. So it would be owned by the developer until such point that the municipality and the service corporation were satisfied that all the conditions were met. No different than a municipal road or streetlight system or whatever it is that's built by a developer.
Thank you.
And thank you for the question. And Brianna, anybody else with their hand up?
I have someone in the chat that asked a question. It was Darlene Plumley, and she noted, does this influence municipal asset management plans?
It does not. All of the assets of the corporation remain assets of the corporation and would not appear on a municipal asset plan as a separate corporate entity.
Anybody else, Brianna?
I don't see any other hands up, Warden.
Thanks very much. So I think Alan had a comment first and then Ron and then Jerry.
Thank you, Warden. So there were a couple of things with respect to the initial financing of the Municipal Service Corporation. I believe it, and I've lost track a little bit with some of the chronology of some of the reports, but I believe it was report number 2 indicated that there would be approximately $700,000 expected from the 4 municipalities in the initial setup of the service corporation. And later there was a comment that there would likely be a request for some seed money from the municipalities to fill out the reserve account in case of catastrophic failure in the early going before there was enough equity built up from the operation of the system. Can we clarify those points, please?
So our legal opinion from our lawyers is that there is no liability with the municipalities. So if there is a catastrophic failure prior to that, the Municipal Service Corporation could borrow, they could go to the lending market to pay for that. But there is no ability to go back on the municipalities as shareholders. The only financial obligation is the contribution requirements as per the report.
Supplementary then, Mr. Warden, if I could, just a point to clarification. I'm not looking at that as whether the municipalities were liable, but rather the reports indicated that it was intended there would be something like $697,000 funded from 5 municipal governments to set up the municipal corporation. And subsequent to that, there was an expectation or likelihood that the Municipal Service Corporation might be looking to the municipalities to provide some seed money for the reserve accounts of the Municipal Service Corporation until such time as it had enough equity built up from the actual operation of the events in case there was a catastrophic failure of the system, because they don't have any reserve funds initially when it's first set up. I'd like to clarify that comment, please.
There is no ability for the Municipal Service Corporation to call on further dollars from the municipality. The municipalities could voluntarily contribute, but there is no ability for them to do that. The purpose of setting up a Municipal Service Corporation is to limit the municipalities' liabilities. and any catastrophic failure or bankruptcy would be the responsibility of the corporation, not of the member municipalities or the ownership municipalities.
Thank you. Ron, you're next.
Well, I guess it was somewhat to what Alan is asking. Does the municipality have to contribute seed money, or they more or less have to contribute almost like a letter that says if something happened? That's my first part.
So it would be the initial contribution as laid out in plan number 2 or report number 2. Beyond that would be strictly voluntary. The 4 municipalities could vote to do something, but there is no mechanism to force any one municipality to do so. Having said that, the entire system is set up such that just like assuming a municipal road, the engineers would certify that it's operating correctly, that there was sufficient warranties in place to minimize the potential for a catastrophic failure. And the recent engineering has been that the catastrophic failures, if they are going to happen very early, but after they're operational, there's very little chance because they aren't as mechanical as many other systems.
So if I may, it's more or less than if you're buying into it, more or less, you need to guarantee that you could cover the seed money, but you don't have to actually have it. Right? It's no different than somebody that you hire as a municipality that says you need $10 million liability. We're not asking him to have the 10 million. We're asking him to prove that he can cover it if something happens.
The business case studies lays out the amounts and it's spread out over 5 years. So that would, if you're voting in favor and voting to become a member, then that would be the financial commitment of each municipality spread out over 5 years. But that's seed funding to set up the corporation.
Thank you. Jerry?
My question has more to do with, I think, the planning department. My question is, Joe, we have 2 existing private communal systems in my municipality. I know the one is preparing to do a major expansion. Would we allow these private systems under inspection or whatever to become part of the MSC?
Through you, Mayor, there's definitely the possibility of that if they ask to become part of the utility. The utility would have to inspect the system before they take it over. They may have to bring it up to a certain standard, but that is a possibility. It would be a decision of the utility to do that. It wouldn't be a decision of the municipality to take it over.
Right, thank you. The reason I had the question because I can see the difference in the money that the developer has to come up with, for the end result that he's trying to achieve. That was the reason for my question. Thank you.
Ron, and then we have some hands up from the public. So if you don't mind, I think maybe and I think Jeanette said somebody in the back. Yes. Maybe you could come up to the mic so we could all hear you. Is there a mic right there? Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, I just had a question which might relate to this gentleman's question. Are these systems only being considered for future development, or are they thinking it might be something that could be used for areas now that are already developed, but maybe failing systems, or lots that potentially could become 2 or 3 homes that are already in existence?
Joe, could you?
Through you, Warden, thanks for the question. I'm not aware of very many communal service developments in Frontenac County right now. I'm aware of the one that Councillor Martin referred to.
I'm talking about replacing like individual systems that are already out there.
Yes.
And
Yes.
starting to do something like what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you. I'll give you an example. So let's go back to Marysville, the example on Wolf Island. So the secondary plan contemplates just that. The existing village has septic systems on their property, and some of them, but not all of them, have wells. Some of them are using shore wells from the lake. And the the plan that council is considering approving says if the community, the rest of the community wants to hook up to that communal services, the township will consider it. They have no obligation to do so, but if there's a community support to do that, then it's possible. And as again, earlier I stated that these systems are like Lego blocks. So the developer could actually easily expand the system to accommodate all or part of Marysville. So it is possible, but it's a decision of the township and council to promote that. And the cost of hooking in to the system would be borne by the property owner.
There's not going to be a communal service available, like, for example, 3 neighbors, they're all houses that have been there for, for houses that have been there for a long time, say example, 4 neighbors, they all know they're going to be in need shortly of A, new wells or B, septic systems. Could they kind of create their own through this service? Or is this only for new developments? Do you know what I mean?
Through you, Warden.
Yes, Joe, go ahead.
That example that you're talking about, we haven't contemplated as part of this work. It doesn't mean the answer is no. If there's health and safety issues happening on the ground in a village and there's potential for the utility to come in and put communal services in, maybe that's a possibility, but it hasn't been contemplated. Generally, we've been looking at new development on communal.
Thank you. And could we have your name for the record? Kathleen
Clayton?
Clayton. Okay, Kathleen Clayton. And Ron, before we get to you, I think there's one more on the line here. Go ahead, let them in, Brianna.
Cindy Deachman, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I didn't realize I'd raised my hand, but I do have a question. So in the February 2021 report and on page 18 of the business case study, it speaks about the viability of this system for developers. I'm just wondering what's the scope of and the specifics of the consultation with the developers that you met with to ensure that this system is acceptable and attractive to developers. I'm just wondering because I know with smaller, more rural communities, there's not a lot of subdivision or condominium development. So I don't know if it's a situation of if you build it, they will come. If this is in place, then they will develop. Or are we going to be in a situation where we're not really being able to take advantage of this because we just don't have that type of density type of development in our area?
Joe Gallivan's going to answer that.
Thank you, Warden. That's a good question, Cindy. Thank you. So, and that question's come up in the public sessions we've held in Marysville. The question is, how do you know that developers are going to come in here and want to build in Marysville? And the answer is because the demand is going to be there. There's no question that there's going to be a demand for more housing in the village. And I think the same can be said for, South Frontenac in particular, with with so many of the at least half the township within the commuter shed of the city. And it's quite possible. So we did have one meeting with developers. I believe it was 5 developers when we started the work in 2018 and 2019. And each one of them were very positive about this idea of setting up a utility. To paraphrase the comments, basically said, if you're telling us that we'll build communal services, put it in the ground, we'll pay for all the environmental approvals, all the process approvals, and then eventually we turn the keys over to this utility. We don't have to worry about managing the system like you would in a private system. They said that is going to make it much easier for us to do a business plan. It's going to make it much easier for us to be able to tell future homeowners that the system is going to be managed by a public utility. So they were very supportive of that. Thank you.
And I might add, they were a lot more excited when that example in South Frontenac where they can build 62 houses instead of 16. So any more questions, Brianna? No, there more. So I'll go back to Deputy Warden at this point, and then I think okay.
The only comment I was going to make, and this is a good example. If you actually looked at the hamlet of Sydenham, you could actually have the potential of having 5 houses in a row where somebody actually has a substantial backyard that could maybe create a communal system if you could get everybody to agree, and then that system could go into this. There, I think those potentials would be there. I think they really would, especially for existing hamlets.
Yeah, and through
Good
you,
point.
Warden, just to reinforce what Kelly said earlier, those are all local decisions. Those are decisions based on your official plan and zoning, whether you would want that kind of infill to happen.
Hey, Warden, you have the floor.
Thank you. Question for Joe. You mentioned in your presentation that an MRA doubles the cost for development. Can you explain why that is?
So technically, there is a requirement from the province that for any private communal development, there's a requirement that a municipality enter into a municipal responsibility agreement that essentially says that should the developer go bankrupt, should the developer be gone from the project and there be a system failure, it's the responsibility of the municipality to bring it up, to fix it and pay for it. Now, there is no formal obligation for the municipality to require the developer to pay any money in it to put into a trust fund. But from what we've heard from the research from the consultants and my own personal work with other municipalities, virtually no rural municipality will take that risk on without requiring the developer to put up monies so they can set up a trust fund. And that essentially, as Kelly said, it doubles down. The only example I can think of that hasn't happened is the Calabogie Peaks Resort in Greater Madawaska. Because there was a lot of assets already on the ground, the municipality was satisfied if the system failed, they would be able to take those assets and use those to pay the repairs. But generally speaking, for new development, I think your treasurers would tell you, do not take that risk on. Make sure the developer pays that, whatever the cost is to put it in the ground, make sure you take that money and put it in a fund in case something goes bad. And that's why we're saying that the utility will take that out of the equation.
Explain again how the utility takes that out. Sorry.
So there will be no need for a municipal responsibility agreement because the infrastructure itself will be assumed by the utility. It'll be owned and maintained by the utility. Like Kelly mentioned, we can do that through subdivision agreements. And what we've heard from best practices is that it would be in the best interest of the utility to not assume that infrastructure right away. That maybe the utility starts maintaining it and monitoring it. But if there's going to be a problem, according to the engineers who put these in the ground, it'll be in the first 2 to 3 years. So we would expect the developer would pay the cost of those upgrades if necessary before they're taken over by the public utility.
Thank you. The next is a request for consideration for council at the next meeting. And as I mentioned before, and I'm sorry to have to bring this up again, but when we first started off with this and we got the report from the consultant, not sure if I missed something or it just wasn't presented clearly or it was my own fault. Not sure what it was, but the consultant in his report said that we're not allowed to have a private services corporation. We had to go through municipal services. Turns out that was an inaccurate statement in the report. So I'm not sure if I just missed it or whether we were being guided by what the words were in the report. As I mentioned previously, I talked to the consultant about this and he has no idea how that got into the report. And he suggested I talk to the Ministry of Environment and Climate, whatever it is, the ministry. And they confirmed that, yes, we are allowed to have a private services corporation. As a matter of fact, as the director pointed out, it's the preferred option. But as Joe pointed out, there's some difficulties in going that preferred option. So I would just like to ask, have input that this be reviewed again when we talk about this at council. Not asking for a decision here again. I just want to have it clear in my mind whether we should be looking at either private services corporation or an MSC. Right now, we're just going MSC. So I just wanted to put that on the table.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Pender, do you have any comment on that? maybe we can have further discussion at next week's council meeting. on
In
it.
Ontario, you cannot privatize a municipal water system, so you couldn't take Kingston Utilities and sell it. You can sell water and you can sell sewer. You can't privatize a system. Can you do a private communal system? Yes, that is the second option in the provincial planning statements. So if this corporation comes into being, it could not sell those water assets. And I don't think that county council would be looking to sell those assets, but you're not allowed to do so. So I think that's the reference in the act, was that you cannot privatize a water system. It doesn't mean you can't have a private one under a communal services scenario.
If I may. Kelly pointed out earlier that townships are allowed to go with MRAs with a private. But so if we go just with a municipal service corporation and the townships decide they don't want to go that route, they just want to go private, what's the value of an MSC, I guess is my question. And are we creating difficulties for ourselves? Should we going one way or the other, or a mixture of both? That's why another reason I'd like to see it discussed in more detail with more information from staff.
I think it's, the key point of this is if that is your township's decision, that is your township's decision. The municipal, you just opt out for that development. If a developer comes to you and this is what makes their development viable, is to become part of the MSC, then that's your decision. If a developer comes to you and they want to keep it entirely private, that's your decision as a municipality. This is just,
We still have to provide money for the municipal services corporation, whether in or out.
if you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out. But if you are in, not all your development would have to come to the municipal service corporation, because the municipal service corporation cannot impact a local planning decision. So if the east side of Northbrook wanted to go down a municipal service corporation and have a subdivision of 35, and in the developer and the township's opinion, that was best done through a private system with an MRA with the municipality, and they wanted to pay double for the system, and that's what you agreed to. That's what you agree to, whether you're in the municipal service corporation or outside. If you are outside the corporation cannot do work within your municipality if you are not a member. On the water side, on the sewer side, you can. If you remember, the consultant was very clear that the county of Frontenac cannot be in the water business. So you could have, I suppose hypothetically, you could have a private water system with a municipally serviced corporation sewage system, but that gets pretty complicated. But again, that decision is your municipality's. If you're not in the corporation, you don't have that choice.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions? Well, I think we're down to the point where, do we have any more online before we, and no more from the public here tonight? So I think we've got a resolution, Jeanette, to read.
Yes. Sorry, that is, just find it here. That's moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Higgs. Resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer Public Meeting Report, Communal Services Draft Business Case Report for information, and further that the matter be referred to the next County Council meeting to consider any changes necessary to the business case study based upon public input. Moved by Councillor Vanderwall, seconded by Councillor Martin. Resolved that leave be given to the mover to introduce bylaw A that has been circulated to all members of County Council, and that bylaw A be read a first and second time. Moved by Councillor Vanderwall, seconded by Councillor Martin. Resolved that bylaw A be read a third time, signed, sealed, and finally passed.
Before we adjourn.
So that's moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Rebel, that the meeting hereby adjourn at 7:09 PM.